All right, so we just finished talking about conclusions and the ways that we do them, the ways that we perform them, the 4 steps we can take to do those. So I wanted to very quickly demonstrate how I would want those conclusions to look in your paper and how they would kind of look in our outline. So here's just a general outline. Maybe you have something similar, maybe you have something a little bit more in depth. Hopefully you have something here that is actually something. But this is generally what we're looking for. This is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for your outlines. So for your conclusion, right, there are a few things that we can do here. So hopefully you remember from the other video that there are 4 things we can do, and I have a preference of them, but that preference isn't necessarily the order in which you perform them. Right? So first part of our conclusion, if we're going to include it, should always be the rebuttal. Right? This is where you introduce and refute opposing viewpoints that anybody might have any problems with. Then we would put in our summary, our restatement of our thesis statement, and finally our call to action. Okay? Now, in the case of the summary, the thesis statement, the call to action, each one of those is probably 1 or 2 sentences, so they can kind of be their own paragraph all by themselves, and that's not too much of a problem. But a rebuttal should be a series of sentences in which you first introduce any opposing viewpoints, and then at the very end of the rebuttal, you would take care of those opposing viewpoints. Now, keeping in mind our principle of 1 paragraph, 1 idea, this might mean that your rebuttal is 1, 2, possibly 3 or 4 paragraphs. They'd be fairly brief, they'd be pretty straightforward and to the point, but that could still be the case, that they'd be that involved, that they'd be that lengthy. So in our case, we're going to go ahead and make a rebuttal, and we'll come up with something where we will talk about the opposing viewpoints, and then we'll go ahead and refute those. So we'll try to keep it down to just 2 very brief paragraphs, but hopefully that'll get you kind of the idea of what it is that I'm looking for. So let's say that for this paper, I have been working on a problem solution that has something to do with baseball. I may have used that in the other video as an example. I'm pretty sure I don't have anybody in this class who's using baseball. So we'll go ahead and talk about that. We'll talk about pace of play. I have a student who's writing an essay where essentially he's saying that the problem is that the pace of play in baseball has gotten slower. It's gotten longer. Games used to be 2 or so hours. Now their average game is something like 3.5 or 3 and 45 minutes. So it's gotten too long, and that's a really big problem. And the commission for the MLB, for the Major League Baseball Association, whatever they're called, has come up with some ideas to try to fix that problem, but it has not, as of yet, really provided a solution. So my student has 1 or 2 things that he's keeping in mind that are going to be the actual solution to this. Now, there are a few objections that might be raised, but we'll go ahead and focus on just one. So let's say something along the lines of there's a fairly large concern that whatever his solution is, that it won't actually fix the problem, right? So you might say something along the lines of the MLB commissioners have raised rules in the past, and they've proven to be ineffective. We'll go ahead and make up a rule here. The no bunting rule was unpopular with fans and did nothing to increase the pace of play. Then we would try to include some citation where we got that from. I would include who it was that had said that and how we know that it's unpopular. Okay. In our following paragraph, we're going to go ahead and talk about why this won't be a problem, right? So maybe something like there's some other rule that we're going to implement that is going to be just as popular. Oh, in which case we should probably mention which rule here. The some opponents feel that implementing a a slow pitch, I think I saw something about that, rule won't actually solve the problem of pace of play and will prove to be just as unpopular as other such rules. Something like that. And that, in fact, probably needs another citation as well. We'll say that it does come from another source, though. Okay. Now, what might we say to try and refute this worry that a slow pitch rule isn't actually going to solve the problem because other such rules haven't solved them in the past? What might we say that would clear that up? Something along the lines of this rule is going to be different. So how is it different? Maybe it's been suggested by players, or it might make some of the league less competitive in one aspect and allow for more play in other aspects. So let's go something like that. Let's talk about how it'll change the way the game is played to make it more exciting, and that ultimately is what is going to be appealing to the fans. While baseball purists, we'll call them, may have problems with restricting pitching speed, the change in the pitch will allow for more plays, and this will allow for more players to demonstrate their skills in fielding and running, we'll say. We need something to back this up. So maybe something along the lines of, in fact, this rule has been supported by the, I don't know, we'll say the minor league players union. Their owners probably don't allow them to be a part of a union, but maybe that's true. Maybe that is something that they have said before and they like. So, well, it's their union. I guess we could do it that way. Okay, so here's our quick little rebuttal. Two fairly short, two fairly concise paragraphs, and then we still have plenty of space for our summary. So our summary would end up being something where we're trying to hit all of the major points that we've talked about in the essay. I expect most of you to be able to do that yourselves. I don't expect this to be anything new or different. Same thing with the restatement of the thesis statement. The call to action, on the other hand, is something that probably many of you haven't done before in past papers, so we'll talk a little bit about this one as well. So call to action is going to be probably still of a part with the summary and the thesis statement, but it's going to be its own sentence. So something along the lines of the commissioner's office is incapable of knowing the opinions of fans without hearing from those fans. It's up to each of us individually to make a difference to save the game we love. So contact the commissioner's office today by emailing them at, I don't know, mlbcommish@mlb.com or something nonsensical like that. Or contact their, I don't know, PR department at 1-800-555-5555. There you go. So let's see, that ends up with, what, two sentences, one fairly short, one a little bit longer. But hopefully it gives us, our audience, a better idea of what exactly it is they can do to make this change happen, how they can be the change in the world, so to speak. So this is probably a little bit different than the kinds of conclusions that you've done before. Hopefully the summary thesis statement is anything we're too confused about or too lost on. But like I said, I absolutely must see these two things. This is first and second most important to me. Call to action is still pretty important. I'd like to see it, but I'd understand if you left it out for whatever reason. And then, of course, your rebuttal, your presentation of opposing viewpoints is still good, still important, but ultimately less necessary than the other pieces. Okay, so be sure to follow the directions on the rest of the assignment, and I'll see you all Monday.